Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Devanya Batiste. I'm the Communications Associate for Chegg. And I just want to thank you all so much for being here. I'm an alum of the University of Texas, and it feels really wonderful to be here. Yeah, hook 'em horns, yes, absolutely. And I'm so happy to have 4 current Longhorns beside me right here. Thank you all for joining us today. So, last year, Chegg released the State of the Student Report. In it, I found a lot of the research in our studies just completely amazing. And the report really opened my eyes and kind of really shone a light on what it's like to be an American student in modern day life. While a lot of our findings were shocking, at the same time, it really resonated with my experience on campus, on UT campus. And I just wanted to open it up today that I'm proud to be a Longhorn and I'm proud to be here at Chegg. But there's a lot of things that maybe plenty of people don't fully understand what it's like to be a student in 2019. So here amongst me, I have Kirsten Terry, Ali Runis, Javier Banda, and Saurabh Sharma. Introduce yourselves, please.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Terry. I am a senior radio, television, film major and business minor. I'm also the co-founder and president of Black Film Student Association. And through Black Film Student Association, I'm committed to advocating for a safe space for Black film students and any other students interested in film or media, anything related to that.
Hi, I'm Ali Runis. I'm a senior electrical and computer engineering major at UT. I also started the West Campus Neighborhood Association to kind of focus on the parts of student life that happen off campus and kind of advocate for infrastructure improvements in West Campus.
I'm Javier Banda. I'm a 4th-year computer science major. So I started and kind of co-founded and now the president of the Hispanic Association of Computer Scientists. And it was really important for us to do that because there's not a lot of us in the industry. So we aim to empower kids that are like me in the industry and just, I don't know, want to get better about doing all that kind of stuff.
Hello, everyone. My name is Saurabh Sharma. I'm the chairman of Young Conservatives of Texas at UT and statewide. I'm a biochemistry major at UT Austin, and just to give a one-sentence description of what my group does, we're a nonpartisan conservative youth organization that exists at campuses across the state with the purpose of being engaged in the full spectrum of politics at the campus level, state level, and national level in a way that few organizations do.
Thank you all so much. Thank you. And throughout this conversation, if any of you would like to download the Slido app and submit your own questions, we'll be more than happy to dive into that. Of course, our first one that we've gotten is, do any of us use Chegg? Yes, yeah. That's actually how I found out about the opportunity at Chegg out in Silicon Valley. Was I used it while I was at UT because, to be honest, I didn't have a lot of time or money for things. I was working full-time downtown. I was also a full-time student. At the same time, I had my own business for 2 years, and then I interned. I was an older student. I didn't have time to go to office hours. I didn't have a lot of the resources to buy all those expensive books. So whether it was renting for cheap through Chegg or, needing help with my math, that was it. I have a degree in rhetoric. I am not the most math savvy person. So Chegg was really like a definite way that I could push myself forward with graduating. And I thank every day that it was available for me. I mean, the reality of it is, and you guys may agree with me or this not, but what I saw on campus was there was a significant kind of cloud over us with the outstanding student debt. I mean, how do you feel like it's affected many of your students, many of your, cohorts with the crazy amount of student debt that exists right now?
Well, it's affecting me right now as we speak. But I think overall, well, I just want to put out there first that unlike other students that are doing everything on their own, I'm blessed to have parents that financially support me, and when I graduate, I won't weigh the burden of having debts over my head. So I just want to put that out there first, because I know students, and I have friends that are doing it all on their own, going to school, going to class, having extracurriculars, and paying for everything on their own. So I think that student debt is a huge problem in America as far as public and private universities, because it's kind of, if you're not getting a full ride scholarship or anything like that, you're using loans to go to school. And I think, and I think that it's, I wish I had a solution to it, for sure. I can't even think of anything else to say regarding it, because it is a huge problem, and it's like if you're not privileged enough to have the money to go to school and pay out of pocket for it, then you're using loans to go, and there's no other choice. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. I just think the reality of it is insane. Right now, student debt is at $1.52 trillion. And just recently, credit card debt in America just got to $1 trillion in 2017. Like, we, just as students, have way more debt than credit card holders, which is just outstanding to me. And with that being said, how do you feel about the financial literacy of your peers? Like, do we really feel like a lot of us really understand what we're getting ourselves into?
I think the answer is obviously no. I mean, I think it's interesting. One of the first things they teach you in middle school math is compound interest, and I think it's one of the things that you see then. I think right before every student applies to college, they should have to see a compound interest calculation one more time, because seeing how debt can multiply itself over the period of time over which you will be paying it, even low interest loans can end up being truly gigantic. And so financial literacy, even on that simple point, is lacking in a lot of the students that end up going to colleges in America. And that's notwithstanding all the other things, the first time you get a credit card, or what a credit score is, or what bank accounts are able to charge you as far as if you don't put in a certain amount of money per month, or overdraft fees. I mean, these are all things that no class ever taught me. I'm lucky that my parents were able to educate me about it, and some of it was done by Googling, but there's plenty of misinformation out there as well. And so I think that all leads into the student debt crisis that we're facing.
Yeah, I really do agree with that. I have a lot of friends who've told me that, the first 2 years after college is more or less just you figuring things out, but that's kind of rough, especially considering a lot of us are graduating with a bunch of debt. And so I've always thought it'd be interesting to pursue something like a personal finance course. I actually took a finance class at UT where the entire last day of the class was dedicated to, this is what a 401k is, this is what a mortgage looks like. And that was really cool, but it was one day of the class, and that's a class that's not even mandatory. So stuff like that is stuff that I think we should consider pursuing a little bit more, because we don't get that information from anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how, many of you feel about this, but I took calculus. I have not used that once since I've graduated. I didn't even use it in class, it was just, oh, cool, let's make this class happen. I would much prefer understanding, being more financially literate, fully preparing myself for what to happen when I am hit with these loans. Okay, cool. How do I manage that? How do I budget that? So we've got a very interesting question, since we're on financial literacy, from someone. As a student, how do you feel about paying for other ancillary materials outside of your textbook? Is the extra cost typically justified?
I think that's a tricky question, because I've tried to make it a rule that I don't pay for textbooks, and I try and find any other way possible. I'm in a similar situation as Kristen. My folks are luckily paying for my education, but I'm trying to make sure that I'm not giving them an extra financial burden. And so I try and ask friends, hey, can I give you a $5 for that old textbook? And trying to find literally any other way to kind of access that information. There have been things where I've figured out ways to kind of make those ancillary materials affordable. I've split a Chegg account before, and that's kind of difficult, because then you're like, oh, people have my password. But just trying to find, there were things I was about to fail physics, And that was really hard, especially as an engineering student. I'm supposed to be good at physics. This was supposed to be what my major was, and I hated that I was doing poorly. And so I felt that like buying things like Chegg was really important to my education to give me that confidence back. It's like, I do know how to do this, I'm just doing some step wrong, and I just need to kind of regain that confidence. But I've been fortunate that I haven't had any other classes that require any things that I couldn't just like barter from friends. I borrowed my boyfriend's iClicker for like a solid 2 years. I think I still have it. I've borrowed his scientific calculator as well, but we kind of have like a calculator swap. But there's things like that where it's like, you need those for class and you can't really, like you're gonna lose an attendance grade if you don't have an iClicker, but
Right.
I think there's kind of like an unspoken rule that like everybody kind of tries and like swaps them.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I don't remember fully feeling like I owned anything, any ancillary material, whether it was textbook that I was renting to give back or clickers. I don't know where that thing is now. Somebody at UT probably has my clicker today. Like, it's been passed down through multiple people. Like, it's just about saving money when it comes down to it, because money it becomes everything. Everything that you do. Can you go out tonight? Can you meet up with your friends? Can you go to even this coffee shop because you have to buy a coffee to hang out? Do you have time to go to the library? No, you have to work. Like, it's a consistent thing that's hanging over your head. And with that causes some serious stress, I mean, how do you feel about the University of Texas handling the rampant mental health issues on campus? Are they doing as good of a job as you feel like they could?
More can always be done.
Yeah.
I mean, up until recently, counseling services at Counseling and Mental Health Center became free. I think that was like last year, and that was only because students initiated it, and it was more so reactive on UT's end, and it shouldn't have been like that in the first place, because UT was like the only or one of the few colleges in Texas to charge students for mental health services. So yeah, things can always be done, and you can never have too many resources for mental health. Because unfortunately, what's scary is that it's become so normalized in college culture, especially at UT, because everybody's always competing to see who's busier and who's doing more, unfortunately. Yeah, and I think that it doesn't just stop at counseling for students that are dealing with mental health. It also can be educating students on how to talk to their friends about their mental illness, because not everybody can talk to their parents. They don't feel comfortable enough to talk to their parents and their family about their mental illness. So yeah, I think it doesn't just stop at counseling and services like that. So.
Absolutely. In our State of the Student report, we found that 60% of students found their academic performance and financial stressors to be equally overwhelming. So not only do we have to worry about, okay, like how well are we doing in this class? What's my GPA at right now? We have to worry about, like, what are we going to eat that day? How are we properly supplementing ourselves with the right nutrients so we can focus, so we can study? I mean, that alone to me just speaks like a crazy amount of what we're trying to go through, what we're trying to accomplish here. And then at the end of the day, you have the debt kind of like hanging over you. It's kind of it's a crazy thing. So with all being said, and I loved being at UT, but like, what are some of the key things you're gonna take away when you graduate? Like, when you think back being at UT, like, what are you really gonna remember?
I would say, for me personally, it's not so much about the stuff I learned like in a classroom. Although that's going to be very, very useful throughout my career, it's more so about like the connections I made, the people I met, and how I was able to learn how I learned personally. Right, so going forward in my career, I know that I learn best by A, B, or C, and not by other ways. And it's not so much about I learned this or I learned this, it's about I know how to learn my career skills going forward. That plus the networking are going to be the two biggest takeaways from me personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, going off of what Javier said, I mean, I've met so many amazing people inside of my major and out, and I'm just extremely grateful for the support system I've had over the past 3 years. And just sitting here right now, another thing that I'll take away is how much I've grown leadership-wise, because I was just joking with them in the meeting room. If I talked to 3 years ago me and told myself that I was going to be doing something like this, I would have laughed in my face, because it's always been hard for me to come out of my comfort zone, and being at UT has forced me to do that in a positive way. So Yeah, besides all the great and awesome people I've met and the connections I've made, even with industry professionals and professors, that is something that I'll definitely take away from being at UT.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was in high school, my chemistry professor said that college is going to be where you meet the people who will bail you out of jail. And I truly believe that I've met those people.
Yeah.
And knowing that I've got those people in my corner and who are excited about my triumphs and are there when I'm sad is a really great feeling. And I also think like I've had so much professional and like personal development through college, through like it's crazy because sometimes it just sucks and you just want to crumple into a ball and not go to class and you're crying in Jester Wendy's at 3 a.m. But then you realize you always make it through it. So it's like even though it's really hard, we've survived. Like I'm still here, I'm a senior and I'm graduating, and it's possible. And I think that that's a good testament to how rugged we've become.
Yeah.
I agree with all that, and it's been the same for me, is that the experiences I've had outside the classroom, or even kind of more narrowly, the experiences I've had in classes that weren't required for my major as my interests branched out, those ended up being much more instrumental to my growth than the classes themselves. And that leads to a very interesting question as to what exactly we're paying for when it comes to college. You know, the business school has started to acknowledge this. They don't have classes on Fridays, and they have intentionally designed their classes in such a way that gives their students ample time to do the things outside their regular classes that they need to in order to succeed in the profession that they're going into. I don't think any of us are business students, but the same applies to all of the industries that we're looking into as well, whether it's film or something in the sciences, engineering, or politics or business. At the end of the day, you need the opportunity to be able to do that. And when you combine the inflexible schedules of classes with the fact that people need the ability to pay for their school and the fact that they need to be able to network, colleges could do a much better job in creating an environment that facilitates that kind of packed schedule, as opposed to having to fight against it as we have to when registration opens every semester.
Right, right. And that kind of leads into a question that we received only a moment ago for older students and or students with parents. Have we seen any accommodations for that in higher education? And I think I can talk a little bit about that. So I graduated in 2017 and I was 26. And no, I didn't feel like there was any sort of accommodations. And in fact, there wasn't, age discrimination is a little bit, that's a little bit too harsh of a word, but it became very difficult to relay to my professors that, I'm doing a lot of things right now. I'm working full-time right now. I'm doing many internships, like trying to make sure that I'm in a great position to graduate. I don't have just free time. I can't make office hours. I'm trying to communicate with you on different areas, and it's just, I was treated in the same kind of vein, or maybe they have this antiquated idea of what the student is like. The student just goes to class and then hangs out after class and grabs coffee. In fact, I might have been the older student there, but none of my peers were doing that anyways. My time was completely limited. My weekends were completely packed, but I was expected, of course, to maintain frame, which I did, but it was difficult, very difficult. I don't know if you saw any accommodations for older students or parents.
I have one of my peers, and it's weird because he's a 50-year-old lawyer, and he's come back to do his BS so that he can pursue the patent bar. But I see him in class all the time. I'm like, don't you have like a real job? Like, what's happening at the firm right now? And because right now our senior design, we have a 3-hour block where we're required to be in lab that, like, for 2 days out of the week, and that's not a lunch break, like, oh, I'm gonna pop onto campus for an hour and a half and take a class. Like, I don't know how he's been able to do it, because it's like, the classes work for my schedule, but I live 5 minutes from campus, and that's all I do. I don't run a law firm.
Right, exactly. And I wanted to bring this up again, we have a very interesting question here too, is, so someone submitted that they're helping colleges in Texas design and promote their financial literacy programs. How best do you think they could reach students? Because many of the programs that exist don't get used. For me, I think with my busyness, I don't know if I would have time to do the program outside the classes that I was already taking. But that would have just been me. I'm not sure. What do you all think?
Well, just on the previous point about older students, I find that kind of interesting, and maybe going to come at it from a different perspective. We have a lot of transfer students and older students that join my organization. Students who did a couple of years at community college after having, some sort of professional life beforehand and then come to UT. And in some ways, and this is reflected in my own experience as well, I think they are better suited to the college environment. I personally took off an entire semester full-time to work in politics my sophomore year, and when I came back, I felt a work ethic and an ability to structure my life around academics as a job that I would not have had beforehand, because you go straight from high school to undergraduate college, and that work ethic in that way never really gets instilled in you, because in high school you're at school for 8 hours a day, and in college it's suddenly a little bit more of a free-for-all. And so I think in some ways older students may have a little bit of an advantage insofar as they have the life experience necessary to have better time management. But that being said, as far as the question on how to structure financial literacy programs, I think there's very few people, myself included, who seek it out proactively. It comes down to, I need an answer to a question right now. When the financial need comes up, how do I get it? And so almost like an office hours structured way, hosting perpetual financial literacy office hours on campuses or something along those lines, I think would be pretty effective, but that's just my thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we started at UT, to literally register, we had to take a course on healthy drinking habits. And I think something like that was fun, interactive, and it was definitely geared towards a more colloquial style that would engage people our age, but it wasn't for a grade. And I think taking a finance class for me would have been a really big burden, because I don't want the weight of having to take a full class on my plate, and then risking not doing well. Then it's well, I got a C in finance, and that's going to affect not only my GPA but also tell me I'm really bad with money. And so it's making it something that's optional but also easy to understand, but not something that's oh, you have to take this. I think is making it as approachable as possible is probably the best way that I've interacted with things, because I remember everything that I learned in that healthy drinking habits. I'm I know how much wine is healthy and what to do when someone has alcohol poisoning. So surely I could also learn how to balance my checkbook.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
And also too, at orientation, we have those plays where they act out different things, so that kind of helped too, because we had to go to those. So
right.
I remember those probably more so than everything I learned in the online thing, because it was, I was watching it. So.
Yeah, those presentations are the reason I sleep on campus with my backpack hooked onto me.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think Ali hit on a really good point, which is that gradifying it would be a really bad idea, because you think of the way, we theoretically teach civics in high school in the United States, but you look at the actual the information retention that people have 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, it's almost non-existent. So I think putting it in that grade scenario is just going to encourage, sort of gamifying it, cramming for the test, and not really going to lead to the retention. I actually still remember that same presentation, and I recently turned 21, and so as I'm trying to establish healthy drinking habits going into my adult life, I'm actually recalling parts of that. And so whatever that was structured around, I think was pretty effective. So whoever asked that question, I guess, find out how UT designed that, and I think that would be pretty effective at that.
Nice.
Can I also add, though,
Yeah.
that if you have some sort of program like this, anything educational in my history that I've done through my organization, it always works best to do it routinely. Every Tuesday at 5, we meet and talk about this thing and this thing and this thing. And especially if it's not something that builds upon the previous lecture, something completely ad hoc, come as you will, come as no knowledge, all the knowledge. Stuff like that tends to get educational points across if you're doing any kind of, this is how you do this thing. As long as you don't build on previous knowledge and you always meet at the same time, somebody will show up eventually.
Yeah.
And just one more thing, it's really important that you have impartial third-party institutions doing this, because there's one group of people who always want to tell you about financial literacy, and that's banks. And I don't know about you, but if I go by a bank and they're trying to teach me about financial literacy, my antenna pops up and it's like, wee woo, this is not good. This is the bad place. And that's one instinct, and that makes me want to not go to that place. But then conversely, people who may be a little bit more naive about that would be fooled into thinking that that is impartial financial advice as well. And we've had groups approach my organization, as they do most organizations, I'm sure, saying like, oh, this is this financial scheme, it's going to multiply your savings, 10 times in 2 years, and like, come do it. And it's like, I am an inherently skeptical person, so it doesn't work on me, but it does make me cynical on all financial advice. Conversely, sometimes people can be fooled by it. And so institutions that don't have an interest in selling you something, teaching that financial literacy, I think is really important.
Right. With most of us, I feel like we were working through college. Do you really feel like there's a good, solid balance between you and your peers with social life, work, and school? Like, do you see an effect of maybe you're always juggling something?
Pick 2 of the 3.
Yeah. My dad made it really clear that he didn't want me working weekdays because he was worried about me being able to balance it. And I'm like, oh, surprise, Dad, I walk dogs on the weekdays now. But it's like, I want that walking around money. I don't want to just have my grocery budget and that's it. It's like, you can't really go out with your groceries.
Right.
But I can go grab a coffee with my like $20 from dog walking. And that's, it's a little bit of that independence, but also like I am totally one to serially just put too much on my plate. I'm like, let me start a neighborhood association because I totally have enough time.
Yeah.
Like that's like taking away so much of my free time, and now all I do is those, and I don't have any time to just like sit and relax, and I kind of miss that because why did I take 10 hours this semester if I don't have free time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I found very interesting from our State of the Student report is that while female students make up 56% of the student population, 69% of them said that they are extremely stressed financially. And despite only making up half of students, they have to contribute to 2/3 of the entire $1.52 trillion in debt. Like, there's a weird kind of obvious imbalance that's happening with our female students. And I'm not sure if you all personally see the effect of this on campus.
I can speak to the tech part of it, at least in the computer science industry, as well as in the classroom. There's a significant drop-off in like the male to female like numbers that are in there, as well as I've talked to a couple of my female friends in the industry, and they kind of told me they've hesitated to raise their hands at a point because you don't know, if you say something that doesn't come across as like particularly intelligent, people will identify you as like, I don't know, she's just that girl over there who doesn't know what she's doing.
That is exactly how I feel in class.
Yeah.
My major is 16% women.
Yeah.
I'm usually one of 4 in a class, depending on the size. Most of my classes are around 50 people. And the only time I talk in class is when no one shows up or when the professor is female. Because I just don't feel, I've had older professors, I go into office hours and I talk like a millennial, I say like and and I had a professor like call me out and was like, hey, you talk just like my granddaughter. And I'm like, I'm here to ask about my circuit, not to be like chided at.
Infantilized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're supposed to have a working relationship. Like, don't make me feel like this. And I didn't go to office hours anymore after that. I tried to make it to the TAs instead because of that. And it's, I think it's a little bit of maybe that, I don't know, like your question was about financial, like, burden, but I think that there's also like that big, like, especially in tech, it's just that feeling like you have to like act like one of the guys, you have to be one of the guys to kind of get by. I totally change how I talk when I'm with like my senior design group than with when I'm with like my female friends in like other clubs.
Yeah, how would you describe those experiences, like with you experiencing gender discrimination, any of you on campus? Like, how would you describe your experiences if you've had gender discrimination?
I could speak to like I guess, racial or ethnic discrimination,
Yeah.
more so than
Yeah.
like the gender. But I don't know, at times I remember being told like, oh, you have an accent, where are you from? And it kind of made me think, like you mentioned, I was not talking to you about that. I was talking about like my computer science programming project or anything like that. And it does make you, I don't know, kind of feel like you have to try a little bit harder to get yourself the same amount of recognition that other people would get. I don't know, with all of that, it just makes this whole student experience a little bit harder on top of all the things we talked about, like debt, and you have so many extracurriculars trying to get involved in and all that sort of stuff. So it's a hurdle for sure, I would say.
You feel like you have to constantly like validate why you're
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I do the same mental gymnastics with myself every day during senior design because I'm the only woman in my team. I'm working on front end, which doesn't feel terribly important when we're writing such a robust tool to facilitate like research on the back end side. It's very like there's a huge algorithm that we have to do, and I'm just making it look nice, and it feels like I have to be like, nope, because no one wanted this job, and I'm good at this, and I will do this. So I have to keep like validating like I belong in this major. I've been here for 4 years. I figured it out somehow. Like I must be good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also race and ethnic discrimination for me as well, more so than gender. Well, I've gotten a typical question that a lot of black students get: what sport do you play? Don't play any sports. Just here for academics strictly. But I think in RTF more specifically, all those classes, I mean, especially my intro classes, they got up to like 200. I could count on one hand how many other black students there were. And it only became really frustrating when we would finally talk about diverse movie or TV content. I wouldn't really have anybody on the left or right of me to kind of like look to and be like, oh yeah, that's Issa Rae, okay, yeah. And I mean, it kind of just, over a couple years, it was kind of just like little things would happen. I'll be like, okay. And it kind of just came to a boiling point one day, and hence, that's how I started Black Film Student Association. So,
Nice.
yeah, it's been more race and ethnic discrimination for me.
Yeah, I mean, and just like you, Kirsten, I'd often be in classes and, I mean, at the forefront, when I wake up every day, I don't think to myself, okay, I am a black female. I just am a human being. That's just how I exist. And I would go into classes and realize I may be the only black person in this class. Like at the University of Texas, which is a massive campus. And it would often, sometimes I get sucked into questions as being like the forefront leader of black people. And I'm like, I can't answer this for all black people. I can answer this as me and myself. But that's just unfortunately some of the roles that you could kind of put into because they don't see many people that look like me around campus, and whether that's in class or outside of class. There are some certain parties, certain fraternities and sororities that you don't feel very welcome to, that you hear really unfortunate stories that happen. And it's like, it's 2019, and it's frustrating because, like I said, I just consider myself a human being. I don't, the forefront of who I am is just human, not any other qualifier,
You brought up a really good point. I remember at times when I would say I liked something or I enjoyed something, people would associate it with, I didn't know Hispanics do that. And that's really cool because they don't mean it in a malicious way all the time.
Yeah.
It's more so of like, no, it's not that Hispanics enjoy this, it's that Javier enjoys this, right? And so that's also a kind of thing that happens all the time, really subtly, but it's kind of, it sticks with you, I would say.
Yeah. And so in our report, we found that 1 in 4 students experience either gender discrimination or ethnicity discrimination.
Right.
That's 1 in 4. And there's 5 of us here, but there's already been conversations on, how we represent ourselves. Just kind of, unfortunately, people see us in a different way first and foremost, rather than really integrating themselves and getting to know us, But in that same kind of vein, UT hopefully will always continue to be more diverse and reflect the world around us, correct? And that goes right into how we see ourselves in politics. I mean, how do we feel about the political system now? Do we really feel like each and every American is benefiting from the current political system?
I feel like Saurabh really wants to talk about this one.
I mean, I think I think the wording of the question is particularly interesting. I think this isn't necessarily the venue to discuss the statistics behind, our political economic system and seeing, who's being benefited by it. But I think to a certain degree there is a narrative, true or not, that exists on campus about which groups are being privileged in this system. And again, regardless of the merits of that, that leads to a perception that is valid and needs to be addressed. And so if people do feel like the system exists to oppose them, then at the very least there needs to be reassurances that that is not the case, or at the very worst that needs to be actually addressed. So
Yeah, mostly I see a lot of apathy. I do a lot of civic engagement, like voter registration, and a lot of it is just trying to convince people that it's worth investing your time to register now to vote later, because you don't know if there is something that you feel like there's something might come up that will make you motivated to go vote later, but you don't want to miss that deadline to register. And I think it's mostly like people just feel like the whole system is just not built for them sometimes, and that it's really hard to engage, and they just can't find a way in, so they just say, no, not going to deal with it. That's kind of, at least even at a municipal level, why I started doing the neighborhood association, because I feel like people see all these problems and they're just like, how do I engage with that? How do I fix that? Because I think as college students, we're naturally problem solvers, and we want to fix the problems because we're smart and capable and we can figure it out. But I think that a lot of times it's just this is too nebulous, this is too big, and there's a lot of people who just don't want me at this conversation anyway, so I'm just gonna tap out.
Which, to Allie's point, I actually think that I know Allie prior to this panel, and I was really excited when I found out she was doing that neighborhood association, because we aren't affected by national politics and things on the news on a daily basis. What we do is we graft the injustices, the small injustices that we experience every day, onto a national narrative, and then attempt to find solutions through that. And it almost never works, because at the end of the day, the local institutions that are around you, the businesses you interact with, the local governments you interact with, and to a lesser extent the state, and then much after that the national government, is what actually affects your life. And so I know a lot of the day-to-day frustrations that myself and my peers experience have to do with our living situation in West Campus. And so whether it's how well lit the neighborhood is, or the rent rates, or the system by which you may or may not have an apartment at a certain time of year, those things are much more of a stressor on students than actual national politics. It's just that when you don't have a tangible way to affect your local environment, people feel lost and they look to national solutions, and they almost never exist at the national level, because to what extent can you affect the national government in your small locality?
Right. That's totally understandable. I was gonna add on to Allie that I definitely feel like I gained more political involvement once I graduated, just because I had more time. It became something at the forefront of my brain versus okay, I need to register, I need to go do this, okay, today is the voting day, do I have time, do I have an exam, what's going on? And Saurabh said, it's just a matter of what's affecting me right now is just what's going on right outside of my own life versus, the very big national level. And at the end of the day, we still need to engage at some point. And to that extent, then for us, how we function on campus will continue to change, which unfortunately can be both good and bad. And one of the things that we found in our report was 2 out of 3 students are genuinely worried about gun violence on campus. I mean, how does that affect you all and your peers? Is that something we talk about every day? Is it something that is kind of just sitting over your head, when another shooting, like the last shooting that has happened, is that it seems so close to home, especially with the recent shooting in Texas.
Yeah, we just, I'm in a population society, sociology class, so we're kind of getting exposed to demography, and we had a study visit us from the University of Turku, think is that how you say it? But they're doing a study specifically on guns at UT, and it gave the class a really interesting opportunity to kind of discuss it. But from what a lot of my peers heard, from what I heard from a lot of my peers, is that there's a little bit of just, I think when it was on the front of like, when it was just starting to happen, we got a lot of information, but now that it's continuing, I think a lot of people have forgotten the rules and what it means, what campus carry actually means, and I feel there's a lack of education, because a lot of my peers were expressing like, well, I didn't actually know, like, one of the questions asked like, which of these signs is legally binding? And it's everything from like a teddy bear that says, please no guns, to like, under this section of law, like, and they're like, I don't know which one's legally binding. There was one girl in the class who concealed carries, and she was kind of helping to facilitate those answers, but there was a lot of it that I don't think we get that information anymore, or however we're getting it, I'm clearly not reading the email.
Right. Just to clarify for everyone, the University of Texas is a concealed carry campus. And this started a couple of years ago. And I was there on campus, and of course, people were frightened, some people were excited. It just became a kind of point of contention for many of the students as well as the educators, because what does it really mean? I remember at the semester right after it started, one of my professors said, if I see that you are concealed carrying, I will kick you out of my class. And so, right in that vein, what does that really mean? Does that infringe on my rights? Like, how is it, with this university, what can they tell me to do? What about it? So it became confusing, and overall just kind of, okay, this is the direction that we're heading,
Yeah, I mean, the campus carry is interesting because I interact obviously with more people than otherwise would with concealed carriers on campus, and most of them are actually veterans who served in Iraq. I'm thinking of one Marine Corps veteran specifically, and there's just a couple of facets to this that I find really interesting. The what is legally binding question, that is extremely important. It's important to both sides of this, because both as someone who may not want firearms on campus, as someone looking to exercise their rights, that sort of education and clarification is important. In fact, the very first speaker my organization brought to address our group this year was a gun store owner and local Second Amendment activist who actually broke down what exactly is legally binding and what isn't. And the firearm issue, more than any other issue, I think, in our political landscape, the concerns around it are ameliorated with education. What is, a semi-automatic weapon, or what is a 30-07 or 30-06 notice in front of a building? What is that? What's actually legally binding? What rights do people have? Who can carry on campus? At the end of the day, the campus carry law only allowed a very small fraction of the university to be able to carry, most of whom are extremely law-abiding citizens. In fact, concealed carry permit holders are more law-abiding than the general population by far. And so, at the end of the day, the atmosphere of uncertainty and fear is more damaging to the campus than robust education, which is what I think the university should have done when the policy was enacted.
Right, but how much safer does anyone feel with this? At the end of the day, we're at a place of education. We want to feel like we can really engage, be there, and not have to worry about the outside forces. For me personally, it was a little confusing as to why, not to why it happened, but to watch it happen. How much safer do you feel with knowing that there are people on your campus going to class with you with concealed carry licenses?
For me, it was just one more thing to worry about, because I came to UT not feeling safe given the other horrific incidents that have happened on campus. But when I think campus carry was passed during my first year, so for me it was just one more thing to worry about. Unfortunately,
One more thing.
Yeah, just one more thing to look over. One more reason to look over my shoulder every day. Besides that though, it was, I don't know. Me and my friends didn't really have conversations about it because it's just, I don't know if we become desensitized and stuff like that, which is also scary. But it was never really. We talked about it when it happened, but after a while, it was just like, okay.
Yeah. I generally feel safe. I felt safe at UT. And with people like Allie, you know, making the West Campus Neighborhood Association, it was truly amazing because for those who don't know, West Campus is an area that is west of the University of Texas campus where a lot of students live. And part of what was driving her association is there are a lot of dark streets, there are a lot of potholes in the ground. I mean, I would drive through there and I'd say sorry to my Volkswagen Beetle so many times, like I'm tearing that car up. And I mean, it just needed fixing. So with an association like that, we could see kind of the changes because realistically, stuff does happen on campus that doesn't always really get taken care of. For us, what we found out is only like less than half of students, 42%, feel that their campus efficiently and takes care of sexual misconduct that happens. And that's less than half. Anything less than 100% is just astounding and sad. I mean, and you're elaborating on some instances that have happened to you. How do you feel about UT? Like, do you believe that they've taken care of any of the sexual misconduct that's happened on campus?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that there is a specific police department that oversees the University of Texas. It has jurisdiction over campus only. Give it every single resource it needs to effectively and efficiently prosecute cases of misconduct, to investigate them and then find out if something happened and to deal with anyone who perpetrates it. One of the things that's very concerning to me is there was a case that was recently in the news of a Title IX investigation that was happening over at the law school. And what the facts of the case were was something along the lines of a female student was being repeatedly harassed by a male student, and she had gotten a restraining order of some sort. And then the claim was that that male student had violated that restraining order several times. And the student was punished by being forced to watch a video and write an essay about his conduct. Now, in either of the two circumstances, that is unacceptable. If he actually was doing that, then he should go to jail. If he wasn't doing it, then the university should not be forcing him to write an essay. And so I think that there's plenty of transparency and more efficient dealing with these situations that can happen on all sides of it, both to ensure that students' due process rights are being respected, but also to ensure that cases are being dealt with effectively so that students feel like there's justice being had.
Yeah, UT has to do better. They just give little slaps on the wrist. Yeah, I mean, I have friends that never got their cases taken care of. And I know that there have been some public incidents, and I see those individuals right back on campus the following semester. So it's fairly disturbing, and given the amount of female students that deal with it a year, it definitely has to get better. So.
And dealing with the Title IX office is a very scary process. It's like, you have to come, we will track you down, we know when your classes are. Yeah. It's very not friendly, especially if you're dealing with a crisis. And that's just sexual assault too. There is no protection for students who are being normal harassed. And that's something I've had to deal with personally with another student. And there's, like, you go to student emergency services and they're like, sorry, can't really do anything about it until it's sexual harassment. And I'm like, well, hopefully not. Yeah.
Because it escalates.
Yeah.
You know, and there's been many instances in many different people's lives where you do seek help. You're like, hey, something is happening to me. I would like for it to be taken care of, but it's not serious enough for the services yet, which is outrageous. I think, you know, being Longhorns, we want our campus to be our advocate, right? We're there more often than we are even at home. We're there with our friends. We've met our best friends there. We want to bleed orange, right? And part of that is making sure that the educators or professionals are there and behind you. And it's stuff like that. It's those instances where, you know, it makes me a little sad, right? That I would hope that as we move forward, different things can happen, right? And with all of that being said, I would honestly definitely do it all over again. I would definitely go back to UT. I would get my degree and, you know, curse to the sky as often as I would, lie to myself by getting up early to finish my essay. I would honestly do it all again. could you all say the same?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just glad I learned very early how to adjust to college life. I mean, I guess it's kind of going on the conversation about stress earlier, but first semester, actually around finals time, perfect time to get sick. I got very sick, and I honestly still don't even know what I had. I mean, it could have been mono, but that test came back negative, so I'm like, I have no idea what I had. But it was terrible. And looking back on it, I was like, why is this happening in the moment? But looking back on it, I really didn't give myself enough time to like rest. I was going 7 days a week, 24/7, no weekends. And yeah, I mean, I had to learn from that. And like when I felt better, I was like, okay, I need to change something. I need to change this now, or else I'm not going to be doing anything beneficial for my own health. So I mean, now I try to give myself weekends off and things like that. But yeah, I mean, if I didn't change the way I was functioning, I definitely would say I would go back and do it again. But you know what? I think I did it okay after that. So yeah.
Yeah, I got really scared coming to college because my mom would tell me these stories. Like my mom also did like computer science. But back then they had these really old like closet-sized computers that took forever to process, which I didn't really understand. So she's like, oh, yeah, I like would come home at 2 a.m. from lab and like never eat. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die in college. So like comparatively, it's been all right. Like I didn't die, I wasn't malnourished, figured it out. But I think I also am able to kind of keep in perspective that my degree will be worth it and that I'm gonna have a job that like I absolutely love and I'm so excited. But it's also like I think that's what keeps me going, and also would be like, yeah, I mean, if I had to do it, like if I needed an advanced degree, I feel like I'm ready to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
So college is an awful lot of self-discovery. I guess you learn a whole lot about yourself, and particularly in high school, you're free to do whatever extracurriculars you want, and you probably always have time to do them. Whereas in college, it's not always the case, and so you tend to find the things that gravitate towards the top to you personally. And with all that stuff, for me, I think I learned an awful lot about how I'm going to be going forward. So I think college was very useful for me personally, as well as academically. Not to mention, it is a really cool feeling to just travel anywhere in the country and like wear burnt orange, or like and somebody in the room will be there and like, hey, that's my school too. So it's absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I have this general philosophy when it comes to, the way things happen, is that at the end of the day, I'm blessed to be at the place I am today, and so I wouldn't do it any different because it could be a lot worse for sure. But I think just on the broader point of college, and this ties into all of the issues that we talked about, the financial literacy, the Title IX stuff, the firearms on campus, I think it comes down to how much, and this is almost an ideological point, how much you think college should reflect the real world. And should there be safeguards in college that don't exist in the real world? And you can see, both sides of that with some of the issues we talked about. So with firearms, if you think firearms shouldn't be on campus, well, that's going to change when you get into the real world. When it comes to financial literacy, the absence of some of those stressors during college or before college lead to people being unprepared after college. And so I think it's really important when assessing all of these issues to decide how much the college environment should affect the real world, because I think what we want to avoid is college being just another adolescence for people growing up. Because I certainly made a lot of mistakes in the beginning couple years of college, and while I wouldn't want to do them differently, I think that if we prepared students to enter college a little bit more like adults as they expect to be treated, that there'd be some fewer trips and stumbling points along the way.
Yeah, and I mean, all that being said, y'all are graduating. I'm so
Hopefully.
very excited. I'm excited for y'all. I mean, where do you see yourselves, right? Like after you graduate, what's gonna happen?
Okay, so timeline-wise, I hope to be interning somewhere this summer, because I'm interested in 3D animation and production management, so I hope to do something like that this summer, applying to a bunch of places right now. So, and then next fall, I hope to be in graduate school, in art grad school, and hope to do that for a year, and then try to find a job after that. Somebody hire me.
We got you.
Yeah, I'll be working full-time after, like, literally immediately after graduation, after some maybe not taking some advice I probably should have. I gave myself a week of vacation. And I was like, yeah, I'll start in June. So, but I'm excited.
deserve it.
I'm excited to just like jump right into adulthood and figure it out.
You're brave.
So I'll also be working full-time after graduation. Can I say the company? Is that not?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to be working at Nike, which is really cool for me because
Nice.
Yeah.
really cool for me because I grew up playing sports and I'm really passionate about the intersection of sport and technology as well as like advancing personal, I guess like motives and stuff like that. So Nike does all those things for me. So I'm really excited to jump in there and start my career, I guess.
Yeah, provided I graduate. I'm a big believer that when institutions have done a lot for you, you do what you can for them. So I'll be taking something kind of low paying in Austin with the intention that I'll primarily be focused on running the statewide organization, Young Conservatives of Texas. And then after that, I'll go to some other state and go to law school for 3 years and study as hard as I can. But that's the plan for me.
Excellent. I'm super excited for y'all. I am just thrilled. Thank y'all so much for this wonderful conversation. And I mean, you know you have a Longhorn out there in Silicon Valley. So if things don't, pan out, you know who to call. You know who to hit up. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for coming to our State of the Student panel. Hook 'em horns.